So we've only got about 4:55 is when this class ends, right? So we've got about 40 minutes. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. I mentioned briefly, Project 1, we are going to be resetting the deadline for that, so don't freak out. Yeah, I know that the original timeline said you should have already been working on it. Obviously, you can't work on a project we haven't given you yet, so don't worry about it yet. We are hoping to deliver the documentation to you by Thursday. We'll see. We want to get it right, so that's the most important thing. And I want to make sure people have time to spin up and know the basics before we get them to do a project. The projects are comprehensive, so once we release it to you, you're probably going to need to put some effort into it to get it done. It's meant to challenge you, it's meant to push you, and it is not meant to be done in an hour and a half. It's meant to take some time. So when we give out the projects, be aware, they are multi-week projects. We're probably going to trim the number of projects from 5 down to 4 because I want to make sure you guys have plenty of time to dig deeply into the projects. I'd rather you do something comprehensive and interesting than having you do a bunch of fluff pieces. So we're going to try and give you more time and give you deeper projects to work on. But those will hopefully be out. The docs will hopefully be out next week, and we'll also establish the new deadlines at that time. The other thing is, as you are probably aware, unless you've been living in a cave somewhere, that we have a hurricane bearing down on us, and we don't know. Really? Really, guys? Yay, hurricanes. No. I've grown up with them, so I'm pretty used to it, but this is a big one. It's a Category 5, and if you're not from Florida, Category 5 is big. It is the biggest category. So, usually they break a lot of stuff. So, we're lucky to be in the middle of the state, but chances are, if I had to guess, and if I were a betting man, this may impact class next Tuesday. So we'll see. I'm not canceling anything yet. I will keep you up to date. And I don't want you coming here if there is a hurricane, so please watch the forecast. One other event that many of us have heard about that is supposedly going to happen Tuesday, and I hope it doesn't, but it might, is that there are a bunch of idiots who said they're going to come to UF on the 12th of September and be asshats. I don't know how else to put it. And by that I'm talking about the white nationalists and neo-Nazis who have said they are going to descend on UF on the 12th. So, and that's not a joke. They really said they're coming. If they do in fact, if the neo-Nazis show up on campus, I'm probably going to cancel class. So just be aware of that. I don't want to cancel class. I like you guys. But I don't like neo-Nazis, and to be perfectly honest, I know, do I have to say that even? I'm not a fan. But to be perfectly honest, if they do come to campus, I would rather you guys not come. I will figure something out. If I have to stream something, I will, so that we can cover whatever material we have to cover. We'll figure something out. But please do not come to campus if there are going to be neo-Nazis here. I am going to not require you to be here if there is a neo-Nazi demonstration, because I do not want you to endanger yourselves to come to class. So I'm very serious about that. So please, watch the news. I'll keep you guys up to date. But if those cretins come to our campus, then I would prefer you didn't come to class, because I don't want anybody to get hurt by a bunch of idiots trying to cause trouble. Yes, sir?
Wasn't the president say that he wasn't going to allow more suspensions on
Yeah, so here's the lowdown. This has all been officially released, so I can talk to you about it. So they had requested to reserve space on UF campus at a UF facility, which by law UF would have been required to give them if UF deemed that it could be done in a safe manner. The president of UF deemed it could not be done in a safe manner, and that they would not rent space to Richard Spencer and his merry band of morons. With that said, They have said, and we'll see what happens, they have said they are going to come to campus anyway and probably show up in Turlington Plaza, right? Where all the crazy people go, I know, right? So anyway, so what I'm saying is, yeah, they're not going to rent space, but they still might show up. And if they do, I don't want you guys to put yourselves in harm's way. So, yeah, yeah, we can talk about how much we hate them for a long time, I imagine. But I'm just going to probably go on and do class now. All right, so we only got 35 more minutes, so let's get started, okay? Shh. Okay, wave your hand. Yeah, yes. What about lab? Oh, yeah, I mean, whatever goes for lecture goes for lab, too. Yes. Yes, if you lose power and you can't do the readings, I'll extend deadlines. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, if there's a hurricane, I'm not going to be like, oh, too bad. You should have like rubbed two sticks together and made electricity. Yes. Now I'm only guessing. I don't think our classes this week will be affected by the hurricane because it's not supposed to hit us until Saturday night. And that's when it's going to hit Florida in general. So it might not even hit Gainesville until early next week if it was going to hit. That's why I think Tuesday is a more likely date because it's not even supposed to be up here until that time frame. So I don't think anything's going to happen this week. Okay, did anybody else have any questions before we get started again? Okay, so, all right, so we talked about the ternary operator. Okay, so another thing we can do when we have logical operators is we can engage in, well, I mean, the compiler will engage in what's called short circuit evaluation. What that means is that when we have a bunch of, when we have more than one expression, when we have more than one comparative expression and we combine it with a logical operator, logical operators will short circuit, they'll stop evaluating if they have all the information they need already. So here we have YANS, NOMS, and CAN-HAS, and damn it, and there's another typo. And it says if CAN-HAS is greater than NOMS, and if we look at the numbers there, CAN-HAS is 20 and NOMS is 50, so that is not true, that is false, right? But this is an AND. So in order for an AND to be true, both sides have to be true. But if one side is already false, then it doesn't matter what the other side is. Once one side is false, we know that this is not going to execute. So when we talk about short circuit evaluation, what we mean is that in the C family of languages, if one side of a logical operator is determined, and that allows us to determine what the logical operator is going to do, it won't even bother checking the second half. So in this case, after it evaluates the first half of the AND, it's false, and it's going to be like, well, then the AND is going to be false, so I can stop now. I don't have to move forward. So in this case, it's going to execute this. This will evaluate to false. And then this second half, it never even gets evaluated. It gets totally skipped over. And this is an optimization. It's an efficiency thing. So by engaging in short circuit evaluation, we save CPU cycles. And in most programs, in most places, this won't make a huge difference. But if you have something like this happening at the core of a loop, a set of instructions that get executed over and over and over again, like in an operating system, this can have a big impact on performance, right? So it can really improve the performance. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about short circuit evaluation? Yes.
Does this mean that we should make an effort to put our conditions in an order that allows for short circuit?
The question was, does this mean we should make effort to put our conditions in an order that makes short circuit evaluation happen more often? And the answer is sometimes. So the most important thing with source code, I will tell you above all, is readability. Very few sections of code will be executed often enough for it to be worth hyper-optimizing. Now, if you just happen to think of it and you can order it, it makes it just as readable and there's no other issues, sure, set it up so that the short circuit can happen more easily. But never sacrifice readability for an optimization like this unless it's a really crucial part of the execution line, unless it's like something that's going to happen over and over and over again and is actually going to impact performance. Because the vast majority of instructions don't. Most of them don't impact performance significantly. So over-optimizing actually just hurts you because it makes the code less readable to other people and yourself. So, does that answer your question? That was kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah. Anyone else? All right, I don't see any wildly waving hands, so I think I'm good. Okay, so that is actually the end of the third chapter coverage, so I'm actually going to move on to the next section of lecture slides. And I'm going to be putting all these up, so if you're wondering, they'll all go up on Canvas very shortly. Okay, so next thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit with you about data types and dig into these specific types we've been looking at in a little bit more detail. We've talked about integers, we've talked about floating point numbers and characters and strings, but it's pretty important for us to get down into the details of these. And some people had some questions about, when we want to use floating point numbers and when we don't. Just as a quick review, we saw this before. There's a few main types of data. These are all the different data types in Java. We have several integer types, and integer types hold a positive or negative round number value. They don't have decimal points, they don't have fractions. And every different type of integer value holds a different range. So we have the byte value, and that's an 8-bit value. It holds numbers between negative 128 and positive 127. The most common use in Java for byte is when you're reading a stream of data from somewhere else. Like if you're reading from a network socket, you're probably going to use bytes because they're the most straightforward way to read data. If you are reading information directly from a disk, you're probably going to use bytes. If you're reading directly from the memory of some device, you're probably going to use bytes. So they're mostly used for lower level operations. A short is the next up, and it is a 16-bit number. Now when Java came out, which was quite a long time ago now, when Java first came out, there were still a lot of 16-bit processors out there. And so having a short was really important because it allowed them to do efficient operations on these 16-bit processors. So especially when the early Java programs often used this short or short integer type, which has a range only from negative 32,768 to positive 32,767. And if you played any old games on 16-bit systems, sometimes like the score would have a limit of like just over 32,000 or something like that, or just over 64,000, and this is why, right? When you may have heard of machines that had like 64K of RAM, and that's because this is the limit of 16-bit numbers. Just beyond that is the standard integer, and for a long time in Java, this was the most common type, and the type, even today, that is probably most commonly used. 32 bits has a very wide range from negative 2 billion and change to positive 2 billion and change, and this is key, it is the native bit width of, still today, a lot of mobile hardware. So if you're doing development for Android, which uses Java, or not iOS anymore, because I think all the new iOS devices are 64-bit. A lot of Java devices are 64-bit too, but there's some older ones. Then you're going to want to use this type because it will fit within the width of a standard CPU. If you use a bigger type, it's going to run into performance issues. Yes, sir?
This might be a really dumb question, but
It's not a dumb question.
what would 129 be, or 128? Is just like
The question was, if this is the limit, what would 129 be? And the answer is, if you want to store the number 129, It has to be in a short. You can't store it in a byte. Does that answer your question? In Java specifically. In other languages, there's some tweaks you can do, but in Java, that's the limit. Like in C, you can have an unsigned type, and you go from 0 to 255, but that doesn't exist in Java. So, yes?
How does stuff overflow? Does it go all the way to the end? So let's say I'm picking in and I get 2 billion, 483,648. Then would that be negative 2 billion? That thing?
That's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to rephrase your question just a little bit. And I'm going to have to end it on a question mark too, but that's okay. So the question was, what if I'm at like 127? I'm going to use the byte because it's an easier example. What if I'm at 127 and then I add one more? What happens? This is what we call overflow. And when you have overflow in a number, the old versions of Java, and it probably still is true, it'll wrap all the way around to the opposite. So it'll go from 127 to negative 128. So this is actually a trick that people used to use in some games where they would actually drive their, like a lot of games have money or gold, right? There are a lot of tricks where people would do where they would somehow get into a state where they had like negative a whole lot of money, and they could actually push their money all the way around to like positive 2 billion. So like it's actually a pretty common trick. I want to say that there was a trick like that for StarCraft, but I don't remember exactly. But does that answer your question? Yes.
Gandhi is aggressive that in Civilization 2 would underflow to the maximum. That's why he was flowing using left.
Okay, that's interesting. So somebody mentioned that if you play Civilization, was it 2, did you say? Civilization, and probably 1 too. It's probably true for both of them. That Gandhi's alignment, his peacefulness, would underflow. So it would actually, it would overflow. It would go so high that it got negative, and he would start launching nuclear missiles. Yeah. So, and that's the kind of thing that happens, you know, when you run into the boundaries of these numbers. Yes?
In the original version of Pac-Man, I remember that if you play for a certain amount of time, you got a certain amount of score, eventually you will reach a level that would basically equal the speed.
Yeah. So this gentleman was remarking that in Pac-Man you could actually reach a level which was basically a garbage level if you went too high. And people say that's how you beat Pac-Man because there's a maximum score you can get in that state. Like there's an end to the game, so to speak. It's not an intentional end. It's like a things fell apart end because all the values started overflowing and underflowing and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely, it's a real thing. I believe there's even a documentary on it. So yes.
So integer overflows and buffer overflows are totally separate things.
Yes, integer overflow and buffer overflow are very different things. Yes, they're totally different. One is a buffer overflow is where you write too much data to a space, and an integer overflow is when an individual value goes too high. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Should you always use the smallest data type for optimization?
The question was, should you always use the smallest data type for optimization? And my answer is, if it doesn't cost you too much in brain cells, and it's pretty clear to you that you'll never go outside of a specific range, then yeah, go ahead and use a smaller value. It's stylistic partly. I would say that practically speaking, the only decision that really matters anymore, use a byte when you're dealing with byte-wise data, because otherwise it's going to be a mess. Like if you're pulling information from a network, use bytes. Just do that, because it'll make your life easier. I don't know that a lot of people use short in Java anymore, just because it doesn't serve much of a purpose. Int and long do serve a purpose. You shouldn't use a long unless you need to, if you think there's any chance that you'll need to use your code on a mobile platform, because there are definitely mobiles that will not work well with the smaller bit width. Okay, so these are our integer types. And so we have 4 different integer types. The long is the biggest one. It's 64 bits. Most processors these days are 64 bits. They have a ridiculous range. It's like -9 quintillion to +9 quintillion and change, approximately, because I wasn't going to list out that number. It's too damn long. Floating points we've talked about, but just to review, we have 2 main types of floating point numbers in Java. We have floats and doubles. A float is 32 bits. A double is 64 bits. These both adhere to a specific technology standard by the IEEE, which defines floating point numbers.